Most people think they're beating inflation. They're not. If your money is sitting in a savings account right now, earning 2 or 3%, and inflation is running at 2.7%, you're basically running on a treadmill. You feel like you're moving, but your actual purchasing power is going nowhere. And that's the quiet financial trap that most people don't even realize they're in. My name is Tony, and today I'm going to show you exactly how I've built what I call my anti-inflation portfolio. A portfolio made up of dividend ETFs, where the income itself grows every single year, not just the share price. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why I picked these 3 specific funds, what the actual numbers look like in 2026, and how this kind of portfolio protects you from inflation in a way that most people never think about. So make sure to stay until the end. If you want to beat inflation, leave a like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So first, let me explain the actual problem with inflation that nobody really talks about clearly. Most people focus on what inflation does to prices. Your groceries cost more, your rent goes up, your electricity bill increases. That part everyone understands. But what people miss is what inflation does to income that doesn't grow. Let's say you're collecting $500 a month from an investment. If that $500 stays the same every year for the next 10 years, and inflation averages just 2.5% per year, that $500 has the real-world purchasing power of roughly $390 by the end of that decade. You haven't lost any money on paper, but you've quietly lost almost $110 in real value every single month. That's why a fixed dividend is not enough. What you actually need is a dividend that grows every year, ideally faster than inflation, and that's the entire idea behind the portfolio I'm about to show you. Now, before I get into the 3 ETFs I use, I want to give you a quick framework for how to think about dividend growth versus just dividend yield, because this is where a lot of beginners go wrong. Yield is how much income you're collecting right now as a percentage of what you invested. Dividend growth is how much that income increases over time. A fund that pays you a 7% yield today but never grows, or worse, cuts its payout, is not protecting you from inflation. A fund that pays you 3% today but grows that payout by 6% every year? In 12 years, your yield on what you originally invested has doubled. That's the compounding effect working on your income, not just your share price. That's the game I'm playing. And here are the 3 funds I'm using to play it. Fund number 1, SCHD, Schwab U.S. Dividend Equity ETF. This is probably the most talked about dividend ETF in the United States right now. And honestly, the hype is justified. SCHD tracks the Dow Jones U.S. Dividend 100 Index. What makes it different from most dividend ETFs is the filter it uses to pick companies. It only includes companies that have paid dividends for at least 10 consecutive years. Then it screens those companies by cash flow to debt, return on equity, dividend yield, and 5-year dividend growth rate. So it's not just picking the highest yielding stocks. It's picking companies that are financially healthy and have actually been growing their payouts. Right now in 2026, SCHD has about $85.9 billion in assets, which tells you how much trust investors have put into it. The expense ratio is just 0.06%, which is almost nothing. On a $10,000 investment, you're paying $6 a year in fees. Its current dividend yield sits at around 3.3 to 3.4%, and the fund is up roughly 16% over the past year alone. Over the last decade, it's delivered a total price return of around 221%. But here's the part I care most about. The dividend itself has been growing consistently over time, averaging around 11% annual dividend growth over the past 5 years. Think about what that means. Inflation is running at 2.7%. SCHD's dividend growth is running at roughly 11%. You are getting paid more every year, and by a margin that is absolutely crushing inflation. Its top sector weights right now are energy at about 19%, consumer staples at 18.5%, and healthcare at 16%. Defensive sectors that tend to hold up well when the economy slows down. SCHD is the core position in my anti-inflation portfolio, and it has been for years. If you're listening there, comment if you have SCHD in your portfolio. I'll like everyone who does it. Fund number 2, VIG, Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF. VIG takes a slightly different approach, and I think it complements SCHD really well. This fund tracks the S&P US Dividend Growers Index. The single most important requirement to get into this index? A company must have increased its dividend for at least 10 consecutive years. That's it. That's the entrance gate. Companies that can't grow their dividend get kicked out. Right now, VIG holds 338 stocks across a broad range of sectors. Its top holdings include names like Broadcom, Microsoft, and Apple, which means you're getting some tech exposure in a dividend fund, which actually helps with growth. The expense ratio is 0.05%, even lower than SCHD. The current yield is about 1.5%, which is lower. But here's the thing. Over the past 10 years, VIG has delivered an annualized return of roughly 12.86%, actually slightly ahead of SCHD on a total return basis. VIG is the growth engine in my portfolio. The yield is lower today, but because the companies in it are consistently growing their dividends and also growing in value, what you're building with VIG is future income. The dividend payments today are smaller, but in 10 or 15 years, if those companies keep doing what they've been doing, your yield on your original investment is going to be much higher than it looks right now. I think of SCHD as my income today and VIG as my income tomorrow. Together, they balance each other out really well. Fund number 3, NOBL, ProShares S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats ETF. This is the one that most people haven't heard of, but once you understand what it holds, it becomes very hard to ignore. NOBL only invests in dividend aristocrats. To be a dividend aristocrat, a company has to have increased its dividend every single year for at least 25 consecutive years. Not just paid a dividend, increased it, for 25 years straight, through recessions, through the financial crisis of 2008, through the pandemic in 2020. These are companies like Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, Colgate-Palmolive, businesses that have looked inflation in the face for 2.5 decades and kept growing their payouts anyway. The expense ratio is 0.35%, which is higher than SCHD and VIG. But I personally think it's worth paying a slightly higher fee for the quality of what's inside. NOBL leans heavily into industrials and consumer defensive companies, which are some of the most stable sectors you can own. The yield is modest, similar range to VIG, but the dividend growth consistency here is unmatched. When inflation spikes and markets get volatile, the companies inside NOBL have already proven over 25 years that they keep paying. That's not a bet on the future. That's a track record. NOBL is the stability anchor in my portfolio. When things get rough, and sometimes they do, I know these companies have already seen worse and kept increasing their payouts. So how do I actually split this across my portfolio? I allocate the largest portion to SCHD because it gives me the best combination of current income and strong dividend growth. Then VIG, because it adds growth potential and tech sector exposure that SCHD doesn't really have. And then a smaller position in NOBL for the long-term reliability and inflation-fighting consistency of those dividend aristocrat companies. The key thing I want you to understand about this setup is that it's not just about collecting income. It's about collecting income that grows faster than inflation every year automatically, because the companies inside these ETFs are fundamentally built to keep increasing their payouts, And then on top of that, I reinvest every dividend I receive right back into these same ETFs. Because in the early years, reinvesting is how your portfolio compounds. The dividends buy more shares. Those shares earn more dividends. Those dividends buy even more shares. It's a slow build at first, but after several years of consistent investing and reinvesting, the numbers start to look very different. One last thing I want to mention before I wrap this up: dollar cost averaging. Every single month, no matter what the market is doing, I put in a fixed amount. Some months I buy at a higher price. Some months I buy at a lower price, but I never try to time the market. I just keep going. Consistency is what actually builds wealth over time, not trying to predict what the market is going to do next. Inflation is not going away. But your income doesn't have to stay still either. The 3 ETFs I showed you today, SCHD, VIG, and NOBL, are how I'm making sure that every year my portfolio fights back. Watch this next video on screen to see my challenge on living on dividends for 30 days without using my salary. Subscribe and I'll see you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depends on your own decisions and actions.